Henderson, and I'm the host of The Bishops, Widows, and More. So today I am bringing your awareness to widows within the church and around the church. And the reason why I'm bringing awareness, because over the years that I've been a widow, since 2002, there is very little out there for ministers' wives. And the Lord has laid it on my heart to bring to you, the nation, just to highlight some of the things that ministers' widows and regular widows go through. As you can tell, I'm from England. I've been in this country since 1986, and I came with my husband. We pastored many churches, and I came across lots of ministers' widow at the time during the years while we were pastoring. When I became a widow on December the 25th, 2002, I became totally lost because one, all my family lived in England. I am one of 11 children. I have 5 brothers and 5 sisters who are all still living. I have 4 children, 1 daughter and 3 boys, or 3 men I should say, who are all living in different parts of the United States of America. Becoming a widow while you're pastoring, it may seem trivial, but to us, it's a very big loss, because at the time, one, your husband's gone, and for those ministers who were not on full-time salary or were on full-time salary, there's a big change right there. But one thing that I can attest to, I had some great leaders, and I still have great leaders because they are now my pastors, Bishop Quan Miller and Dr. Patricia Miller. They have been my rock from before my husband died, and during all his illnesses that he went through and afterwards. And I tell the story after he died. We were at 910 West Livingston Street, and that was our home church. The day I came back to church, which was after a couple of weeks after my husband died, I remember the children went inside church, and I remember standing outside the church, and I looked and I froze, because this was where the last time I had a conversation with my husband. There was a Christmas program going on the Sunday before, and during the program he took ill. He had a massive heart attack, and he died 3 days later on a Wednesday, on Christmas Day, as I said. So coming back to the church, I just completely froze. I couldn't go inside the church. I'm not sure what it was. Now I understand it was a fear of because what had happened to him. And I remember standing there looking, and by chance, Dr. Patricia Miller drove up. She came out. We said good morning. And before she went into church, she turned and looked at me just standing there. And she said to me, her words were back then, 2003 was, "What's the matter, Sister Henderson?" I went, "Sister Miller, I cannot get into the church." She didn't say anything. She says, "Okay." She looked at me and she said, "Put your hand on my shoulder and I'll lead you into church." And that was 2003. And here we are in 2023. She's still my rock, and I still lean on her, but not as much. So I'm here to encourage widows, because I've come across so many ministers, widows who, unlike me, I didn't live in a parsonage. A lot of them have lived in parsonage after their husband dies. Within 30 to 90 days, depending on the church and their needs, they need the parsonage. So you, the widow, have to pack up your family and move out and find somewhere else to live. Another thing that happens, that, as I said, if your husband was on full-time salary, that salary is gone. Many widows have told me they've had to find a job, another source of income, to make up for the income that they've lost. Sometimes some of the children are displaced, not understanding, depending on their age, of what just took place. We have to up and move out of the house where they, depending on the years that they've lived in the parsonage, they have to move. So we, as bishops' widows, as I put it, ministers' widows, have to make a lot of different changes throughout all of what just took place to us. Some of it takes 6 months, some a year. It all depends. So I'm here to encourage, and from time to time we're going to have other ministers' widows to come on the show, and we're just going to have a general session. And regular widows, regular everyday widows in the church, they'll be coming on the show too, to give you their experience. There's going to be a lot of tears, so whenever you see me come on, get your box of tissues out, because yes, we will be crying. Tears will be flowing, but it's good tears. And as I said, as we go, we still need your prayers. We still need your support. We still need your encouragement. It may be a month, it may be a year, it may be 10 years. Like me, it's 20 years. I was 45 years old when my husband died. And when he died, I had one in college, one in high school, one in middle school, and one in elementary school. So I had to do all the changes, the different changes, while working to keep a roof over our head. Did I make mistakes? Yes, plenty of mistakes. I made financial mistakes, I made living mistakes, but here I am to tell the story. And even though, yes, it's been 20 years and I've moved forward, I've done a lot of different changes, but I'm still here to encourage other widows. You are still living after your husband's gone. Psalms 146, verse 9. It says, "The Lord watches over the foreigner and sustains the fatherless and the widow." Psalms 147, 3 says, "He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds." Psalms 119:50 says, "My comfort in my suffering is this: your promise preserves my life." And the last Psalms 119, verse 116, "Sustain me, my God, according to your promise, and I will live. Do not let my hopes be dashed." Thank you again. As I said, these are just a few scriptures. There are a lot of scriptures in the Bible pertaining to the widows and what the church, where they can, to take care of the widows. First of all, let me share my story. After being married to, let me say, the man of my dreams, who took ill on the seventh day after we got married. He went into a coma, and I remember calling my mother on a landline phone, because cell phones weren't popular back then. And I called her because everybody had, we'd come over here for our wedding. We got married in Florida. I did destination wedding before destination wedding was a thing. And he took sick. I remember, as I said, calling my mother, and I said, Mom, Andy, we call him, which is H-E-N-D-Y. Andy is taken sick and he's in hospital, he's in a coma. I'm going to be a widow and I've only been married 7 days. My mother started praying for me on the phone because at the time I was shriveled, whatever. But he lived after all that, and he lived for 28 years after that first episode. And when he died on Christmas Day, now that was a day where it was supposed to be a celebration, as we all know, because it's a big thing here, big thing in England. I remember sitting in the visitor's room, because he was in ICU. Bishop Chenault, who was alive at the time, came to the hospital, and Bishop Kevin Cabarrus. And they came and they had said, I think this may be it, Sister Henderson. And I said to them, while sitting there, yes, it is. And they said, how do you know so strongly that this is it? And I told them my husband's dying wish has always to be, if he died, let him leave from church. So on the Sunday when we were at church and he had his heart attack and we got to the hospital and they was doing everything for him, I had said, this is it, he's not coming back. And people were looking at me and people thought I was strange, and I had to keep explaining to them, this was his dying wish. If I got sick, I wanted to leave from church. And he got his wish. He left from 910 West Livingston Street and never came back. So then it was my turn to plan and do everything. And I thank God for the people that were around me. 910 West Livingston Street was a rock solid group of people who came, they visit, they did this, they did that, they were always there. My pastor's wife, as I had said, Dr. Patricia Miller, had taken sick, but she made sure I was taken care of. The job that I was on, I worked for Orange County Public Schools in the clinic. People from work came to visit. But there was 3 men that came to the house because I kept sitting there and thinking, oh, well, how do I do this thing by myself? Because as I said, I had no family here apart from my children. Everybody was in England. Bishop Thomas Chenault, Bishop Kevin Cabarrus, and Bishop Quan Miller came to the house. And we all sat down, and they said, Sister Henderson, we're going to help you with this. Because at the time, as I said, I was totally lost of how to prepare for a funeral. So, between the 3 of them and myself, we made arrangements for the funeral service and everything got done. The service, I've never seen so many ministers and people in my life at one church, packed, people outside. And that's when I knew, okay, I'm not, but even though I didn't have my earthly present family, the church family was there. Yes, my brothers and sisters, everybody came over for the funeral. Even my mother, who was not well at the time, she came over. So, going along a few months ahead now, everybody's gone back to their different countries where they lived. So I was here with these 4 children. How do I maneuver all this? How do I get through this? 2 months later, my mother died. So I had to make arrangements to leave my children, to go home to England to deal with the loss of a mother. Now, I've just lost my husband 2 months later, my mother. Anyway, we did the funeral over there because I was one of the oldest children. You know, it was our job to see. But I have brothers and sisters who were quite capable. I just joined in. I came back to Florida, and the one uncle that I have, my mother's oldest brother, who I looked to as a father, he died. So within the space of 4 months, I lost my husband, I lost my mother, and I lost my uncle. I remember going to see Bishop Miller in his office, and that was one of many visits. And I used to say, Bishop, I know you're tired of seeing my face. No, Sister Henderson, he would say. And I would say, who do I grieve for? Who? I said, I can't be wearing black all this time. And he just told me, you take it one step at a time. And I thank God for wise counsel. After that, I met other women within the church, going to the different conventions, the different conferences, the different services, who then expressed how they dealt with being a widow, losing a family member. And I kept thinking, okay. And that was back in 2003, 2004. I kept thinking, well, God, there's an open door here, but how do I maneuver? So it was laid in my heart back then, but I just didn't know the right steps. And fast forwarding a bit, I always kept saying to Bishop Miller, there's something about bishops' widows I need to help. Or I said, I keep talking to them and they keep telling me everybody has a different story. And he says, well, you need to write a book. And I kept saying to him, yes, Bishop, I need to write a book, but I don't know where to begin. And I kept saying this over and over, I don't know where to begin. I went home to England 2022, and I was speaking to Bishop Brooks and his wife, Lady Brooks, in the office. And I was telling him different things that I would like to see, some things that I didn't like, because I could express myself both to him and Bishop Miller too. And he said to me, you need to write a book. I said, well, Bishop Miller keeps telling me the same thing, and I keep telling him, I don't know where to start. He looked at me and he said, start where your marriage ended. And it was almost like a light came off in my head. I said, okay, yeah, that's a good idea, but I still don't know how to make the first step. So he said to me, have you ever heard of podcasts? So I said, yes, but I don't know much about a podcast. So he says, well, I would like to interview you about your journey of being a widow within the church. So I says, yes. I said, what kind of questions are you going to ask me? And he said to me, okay, I'll send you the questions and you just read over them and, prepare yourself. Which he did. He sent me 25 questions and I was preparing myself for the questions. We did the podcast and not one of the 25 questions that he had sent to me did he ask. And I kept looking at him while he was interviewed, and all this stuff kept coming out of me, and I'm thinking, okay, where was this coming from? Every question that he asked me, I was able to answer. So I say this to say that, as I said, every widow has a different experience. My journey to being a widow started the seventh day, as I said, after my husband took sick. Because I tell people, My husband was sick all along throughout the whole entire married life. Was I tired? Yes. Did I want to give up? Sometimes. But then I had to encourage myself and remind myself about the marriage vows. And sometimes some people don't take the marriage vows serious. It says in sickness and in health. Well, I had the sickness part of my marriage life. So the Bible also states, whatever state that he finds it, be happy, be content. So I never had a frown on my face. Whatever I had to do, I did it in pleasure, with honor, with a smile on my face. Tired, but I did it. I worked, sometimes 1, 2, 3 jobs with small children, pastor in the church, taking care of a sick husband, but I did it. I could have given up, but I didn't. I pushed myself, encouraged myself, and did it. One thing that I can share with widows is, even though your husband has died, he's no longer here. There is no length of grieving time, because people want to block you in certain time limit. There's never a time limit, because you're always going to remember things. My suggestion, or what I tell the widows that I speak to, it gets easier along the way. It's just day by day. It gets easier. You don't feel the pain as much when you first lose your husband. You miss them, you miss their presence, you miss the little things. But the pain gets bearable, so to speak. It's not as painful. And as I tell people, you're living. So you have got to change. Just like we just went through the pandemic. Everybody had to change how they did things. Schools changed. Who would believe children would be at home and teachers teaching on the other side of a camera? But we did it. Churches changed. People were at home. The preacher was on the other side of the camera. So we as widows, we have to get ourselves to a changing and taking care of ourselves. I've heard the stories of ministers' widows who they didn't want to do anything for themselves. And the few that I've spoken to and had to have a hard talk with them. You didn't die. You're still here. You have family around. You have the church around. You still got to live. You've got to learn, which is hard, but you get to do it, is learn to date your own self. And people used to look at me, date yourself? I go, yes. I take myself to the finest restaurants and I order whatever I want on the menu. You've got to learn to take yourself out to different places, go for walks in the park, meet other people. I'm not telling anybody to go to any dating app or whatever. Everybody's different. Not for me. Go to the movies if you like movies. Go to the theaters if you like. Go to the library. There's all different kinds of things out there what you can do. In church, join in the activities. And you also can be a help, which I know sometimes the marriage ministry sometimes forget the widows, but we were married. We're not going to tell you what to do, but we do have some sound advice. And you can always approach whoever is the leader of the marriage ministry and say, is it possible for me to come and join in? You'll be surprised the open arms that you they'll receive you into their ministry. Singles ministry, go to the singles ministry, regardless of what age you are. You have encouraging words for the singles also. So my idea, my thing, whatever you want to call it, to other widows is learn to participate in things inside your church and outside. Volunteers. Schools always need volunteers. There's colleges, there's things out there. In the hospital, maybe not as much because of the pandemic, but you can always ask and volunteer. Go to different county meetings, different things that are happening in your community. Participate. It's hard at first making the first step, but once you've made that first step, everything comes easy. I'm speaking from experience. So, once again, widows in the church, learn to participate in whatever activities you can find to do. I want to thank Bishop and Sister Miller for encouraging me. I want to thank Bishop Brooks and Lady Yvonne Brooks from New Jerusalem Church, Birmingham, England, where I'm from. And I also want to thank and I also honor Minister Frankie Solomon and Dr. Rose Solomon for giving me this platform and for helping me and pushing me to my vision, or for my vision, I should say, the Bishop's Widows and more. Thanks again for joining us.
I'll be the one by your side through the good and the hard times when we're laughing.